Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Free agency starts in just a few days, which is really the unofficial kickoff of I guess what we call the roster building season. So here to help me talk free agency, talk draft, talk New York Giants plans for the offseason is Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants and New York Giants on SI. Patty, how you doing? It's been a little while since I had you on.
Yeah, it has been. Definitely. Doing
So,
well. Hope you are as well.
I'm trying to just trying to chill, a little calm before the storm, before free agency starts on Monday. The the official tampering period after the unofficial tampering period in Indianapolis, where nobody walks around the city without a cell phone stuck to their ear. So
Yep.
all right, so let's talk New York Giants. Let's talk off season, Patty. And what I thought I would do, um, we're going to kind of hit some positions of need, some things that you think maybe need to get done, and just talk about options and what way you would lean at some of these positions. And obviously, and we'll take into account free agency and the draft as we do this. So obviously, the big question, the big swing, the big thing the Giants have to do. John Mara made this 100% clear back in January. Is they have to find a quarterback. Uh, and John would obviously prefer that they find somebody not just for 2025, but that somebody who could be a long-term answer. So if you're the New York Giants, as we enter this roster building phase, how do you approach this? And who would your favorite guys be, for the Giants to bring in?
Let me start off by saying the Giants have kind of a mess here. It's kind of a dilemma. And I say that because John, without so much saying it, kind of said that if Brian Dable and Joe Shane don't turn things around this coming year, they probably will not be back in 2026. So I think back to 2019 when Pat Shermer came in. They drafted Daniel Jones. Pat Shermer didn't last until I think that was his last season, and then
Right.
Joe Judge came in, and you had this whole odyssey with different head coaches coming in, different systems, and Daniel Jones. Maybe he was overdrafted. There's no question, but he never really had a chance with all the changes and starting over and all that stuff. That's almost the way I see things kind of going now with this situation. While I never want to sit here and say, oh, that guy should have been fired, I think, in the best interest of the team, they kind of missed the mark on this one. It was like, okay, you were either going to keep them or you were not going to keep them. And now you've put yourself into a position where maybe they have to do some things that they ordinarily wouldn't do if they were, say, in their first year. You look at, for example, Washington last year. They could afford to take a swing on a rookie quarterback. Just so happens they got it right. They could afford to take swings on other guys, and they got it right, but not when you're in your fourth year and you have 2 years behind you that haven't been so good and you've actually gone backwards. You can't afford to take those swings. So, that being said, it's a very touchy situation for the Giants and for Joe Shane and Brian Dable. To answer your question, though, for quarterback, I think they have to get a guy in here that is going to fit as much as possible what Brian Dable likes to do on offense. I keep going back to Jameis Winston, who's got the arm strength to throw it vertically, who doesn't really have the baggage of an Aaron Rodgers, who I think would be receptive to being a mentor to a rookie quarterback. But you also have to draft a quarterback. You're in that position now where you have to get a guy. Now, do they trade up to get that guy? I don't know. It's going to depend. To me, it's going to depend on who do they get as their veteran bridge, and can they live with that guy for 2 or 3 years? If they had got Matthew Stafford, I think they would have maybe said, we don't have to trade up. We could probably afford to take a guy from the second group of quarterbacks. I don't think that they're in that position anymore. So I would think, Jameis Winston to me would make sense. I don't think I really want to see Aaron Rodgers here, given what happened with the Jets and just all the things that have, come out. Plus the fact that he's kind of declined over the last couple of years. If you look at his stats from 2021 to 2024, they've gone down. So I would say Jameis Winston is the veteran. And if they can get Cam Ward in the draft, I say go for it.
Patty, why do you and I always think the same way?
I don't know, but it's scary.
It is. It's really scary. And one of the funny things is what made me think about that is you were talking about like first or second year versus fourth year. And of course, Joe deflected when I asked him, which is what I would have expected him to do. But in Indianapolis, I did ask Joe if, because this was his fourth offseason instead of his first or second, if he had to approach this differently. And he basically just said, there's always pressure. I get what the situation is that we're in, and all of that. And he gets it. He understands it. And I'm with you when it comes to the Cam Ward train for the simple reason that, look, having failed on Matthew Stafford, in my view, in my way of thinking, there is no quote unquote bridge quarterback or veteran quarterback out there who can save Brian Daboll's job and can save Joe Shane's job. The right rookie can excite the fan base, can show some promise, can show some potential, and could maybe show ownership that they're on the right path. So,
and this is why, last year I was screaming for them to draft a quarterback, even if they had taken one, day two, or taken a flyer on somebody later in the draft or even after the draft. You had a historically deep quarterbacks class. You don't have that this year. Ideally, if you're in a position to where you can punt on a quarterback until 2026, when that class is going to be deeper, you do it. Unfortunately, this team can't punt. They have to do something now.
Patty,
And it's a bad situation.
How much different, and I said this last year, and I think we've talked about it before. There were 6 quarterbacks that went in the first round last year, and Joe and Brian, for whatever reason, didn't think that JJ McCarthy and Michael Penix were the right fit for the New York, New Jersey market. And that's fine. But how much different, and not saying that the wins and losses would have been different, but how much different, how much more fun, how much more interesting would the post Daniel Jones games have been for the Giants if Spencer Rattler was taking the snaps for the Giants the last 6 or 7 games of the season?
Oh, I think it would have been a lot different. It would have given the fan base something to look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
What do they have to look forward to now?
Right.
Other than, what might happen in the draft and free agency. But, you go back to the season last year after Daniel Jones was clearly not the answer. What did they have to look forward to? You had
Absolutely.
planes flying overhead. You had fans saying, oh, I give up on this team. You had fans selling their tickets. I mean, you could get a ticket for like less than $10 later in the season. I mean, what does that tell you? It tells you that the fan base, and rightfully so, I might add, got disgusted. They had nothing to look forward to. At least if you have a young quarterback and you say, okay, yeah, he's got to go through some growing pains, but there's something to look forward to moving forward. And I really believe, and this is why I was pounding the table for a quarterback, whether it be first round or second, third, whatever. I believe that would have energized the fan base and given them something to be excited about going into this season.
Absolutely, Patty. Let's turn to some of the other positions of need. One of the things that Joe has been clear about is that he thinks 4/5 of the Giants' starting offensive line is in place, with Andrew Thomas, John Runyon, John Michael Schmitz, and Jermaine Illuminor playing right tackle. That obviously leaves the right guard spot. It leaves some depth issues to be dealt with. So it's a twofold question. How do you agree with Joe in terms of the starting group, and how would you approach, filling out the final starting spot and maybe filling out some of the depth spots?
Yeah, it's interesting. Um, a few years ago, if you remember, Dave Gettleman tried the same approach, which was to fill the offensive line with veterans, and it didn't really work out. Now, Joe last year, he got lucky. All right, he brought in, as you said, John Runyon Jr., Jermaine Illuminor. They became starters. Greg Van Roten was added after the fact, when it was obvious that Evan Neal wasn't going to be ready to go. And the line wasn't bad for the first 6 or so games that they were all healthy. It's when injuries started that unit started to fall apart, which exposed what has been a multi-season long problem, or seasons long problem, lack of young depth that can be developed to step in and not miss a beat. So you want to mix it in. I think you want to have a veteran in there, because look, next year they've got a new quarterback coming in, whether it's a veteran, a rookie, or a combination of the two. You can't not fix that line. You've got to make sure that line is fortified. I think the right guard spot, that's telling us that Evan Neal is maybe not a consideration there. And especially if they go and they spend big bucks to get a guy, like a Will Fries or a Tevin Jenkins, for example, to fill that spot. That should tell you all you need to know about where Evan Neal is going to fit into the grand scheme of things. So yeah, I think, you've got to get that line. You're in a position now to where that line has to be a veteran group, but you also have to plan for the future. Jermaine Illuminor's contract is up after this coming season. You're going to probably have to make a decision. Is John Michael Schmitz your center of the future? He's been kind of progressing on a slow pace. John Runyon Jr., I think his contract, the guaranteed money runs out, I think, this year. So you're going to have some youth, I would think, in development, so that when you have these decisions that pop up, you can make them and move on. Otherwise, you're going to keep spending on that unit time and time again, and just, it's not going to go anywhere. And I think, Ed, adding Chris Snee to the scouting staff is going to help them. I am very optimistic that Chris Snee, who knows a thing or two about, offensive line play, I think he will come up with some prospects that maybe they can turn into starters down the line.
Absolutely. The Giants are paying offensive line wise, not only for the miss on Evan Neal, but they're paying for what has been a miss on Josh Azudu.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not as much of a miss on Azudu as a mishandling of Azudu. And Marcus McKethan was a 5th-round flyer, and some of those guys hit, some of them don't. But Joe has not had success when it's come to the offensive line in the draft. I'm with you. I'm optimistic about Chris Snee. And when I think about, Joe gets so much praise for last year's draft, for the 2024 draft, but there's one area of that draft that was an obvious thing
The
that they just
trenches.
ignored: the trenches on both sides, and exactly what you're talking about. I think it was George Young who always used to say, when you're in doubt, just draft a big guy,
Yep.
just draft a lineman.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe didn't draft one on either side of the ball
Mm-hmm.
in 2024. And I thought that showed up in spades all year long in
Sure did.
issues they had on both sides.
Yep.
So anyway, Patty, let's turn to the defensive side of the ball. And obviously let's stay in the trenches. Let's talk about the defensive line. As wonderful as Dexter Lawrence is, the reality of it is, when it comes to the defensive line, and we're not talking about the edge guys, we're not talking about the linebackers, we're talking about the hand in the ground guys. The sad reality is he's basically all by himself. Um, how do you fix it? Is there a free agent target or two? that you would be comfortable with, or do you just rely on this really deep draft class, or do you do both?
Well, I don't know that they're going to retain Raheem Nunes Roches. He's in the final year of his contract, I believe, doesn't have any guaranteed money. They're looking to save a few bucks. I would move on from him. Look, this is kind of the same situation as the quarterback class last year in the draft. This defensive line class is historically deep. All right. You've got guys that are probably going to go on day 2 that should technically go in day 1, and vice versa. So, guys that you're going to be able to get some really good value, I think, in this draft class at defensive lineman. So, if you can get a young, up and coming guy to pair with Dexter Lawrence, Dexter, remember, they have under contract for quite a few more years yet. Get a young guy who can kind of grow old, if you will, with Dexter Lawrence. And all of a sudden, that defensive front is going to be worlds better than what, it was without Lawrence. I mean, now remember last year, the Giants, Shane Bowen had to change up how he approached or how he schemed. He went back to more of a 3 defensive line front as opposed to the 2 that he was kind of favoring. So get a guy in there who can complement Dexter, because look, every time Dexter came off the field, we saw what happened. The other team went right at whoever came in to replace him, and oftentimes with success. So get a young guy, preferably on day 2 if you can, and just pair him up with Dexter and let the 2 of them just gel together, because Dexter just, as good as he's been, ever since the Giants traded away Leonard Williams, you've kind of seen the shift into how teams approach Dexter, to Dexter's production, which is still very good, all things considered. But when Leonard was there, it was really, really, really good. So yeah, I think they have to go draft there. I don't know that I would spend big money on a veteran at that spot.
Yeah, I guess for me, I'd like to see the Giants do both. And you can't do everything in one off season. I've said that many, many times. But if you can find a veteran who's not going to break the bank, and who might be a little bit better than Raheem Nunez Roches, because Dave Gettleman used to talk about this. Joe talks about it. We see it in Philly, where they bring waves of defensive linemen and then waves of pass rushers, and you can't just have. To me, you can't just have one or two. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think it would break the bank to bring BJ Hill back for a couple of years. But something like that would appeal to me. Not spending gazillions of dollars on the top defensive tackle in free agency, but some sort of a veteran to help as well.
Yeah, I mean, assuming he'd want to come back, we don't know.
Yeah, we
Um,
don't know. I mean, it's a name that pops out
right,
to me when I look at the list
right.
of free agent defensive
Yeah,
tackles.
I'd be fine with that too. If both sides wanted each other, I'd be fine with that. But I do
You,
think you'd be stupid not to dip into this draft class.
yeah, that's true. But BJ Hill would definitely challenge Jermaine Illuminor for best dressed Giants 320-pound plus guy.
Yeah,
So
seriously.
anyway, Patty, let's talk about cornerback. What's your what's your plan?
In a perfect world, the Giants get DJ Reed of the Jets. I mean, young veteran, an ascending veteran. Um, I think he can be a CB1 for this team, because right now Deontay Banks just isn't that guy. You also have the Marcon Manuel connection, having coached over at the Jets. Uh, I think, though, we talk about free agent spending for the Giants and where they're going to put biggest bucks. That's got to be a position they have to address, because look at the receivers in the NFC East. The Eagles are too deep, as far as quality receivers go. The Commanders just got Debo Samuel to pair up with Terry McLaurin. Dallas has good receivers. You face those teams twice a year, and you're going to go into the 2025 season and beyond with just a cornerback in Deontay Banks, who you still don't know if he's a fit for more of a zone coverage type of scheme. I think that would just be very foolish on their part. I would not be surprised if the Giants spend big money to get a cornerback, and they will cost. Let's not kid ourselves. I've mentioned DJ Reed. Charvarius Ward of the 49ers would be an option for me. Byron Murphy, if he shakes free from Minnesota, would be an option. Carlton Davis. Remember, Joe Shane seems to go for guys that they have an opportunity to look at up close and personal, being in a game or a joint practice. So I could see them kicking the tires on Carlton Davis if he becomes available. So yeah, these are just some of the guys. There are corners in the draft. Um, Maybe they take a day 3 pick or they use a day 3 pick on one of those guys. But I think cornerback, if quarterback is priority 1, cornerback to me is priority 1A.
Yeah, I might. I don't know. I don't know if I would look at it as 1A, but it's definitely up there. It's definitely a place where
In
they
terms of free
need,
agency.
yeah, where they need to spend money. Absolutely. In terms of free agency, I think that's a place where they absolutely need to spend some money. Um, Patty, let me ask you. Let me just put it out there this way. There are other needs, and we know that, as I said earlier, you can't fix everything in one off season. You can't fill every need. There's only a certain number of draft picks, and even though Joe says, he's got some cap money, yeah, he's got 47 or 48 million dollars, but the reality of it is, as soon as you start to spend it, it goes away a lot faster than you think. So, they may have to do some other things, and the resources are not unlimited. Um, what else, when you look at the roster, what else do you think they need to do?
Well, they're going to have to address receiver. If they lose Darius Slayton, like I believe they will, who's your receiver 2? All right. Jalen Hyatt, unfortunately, just hasn't panned out yet. I don't know if he will. I hope he does. I like Jalen. I know he works at it, but I don't know if he's can ever be that wide receiver 2 that they're looking for. So they're going to need somebody, preferably a big guy, a big target that can help take some of the focus off of Malik Neighbors, who is going to probably draw double coverage. Right now, if they were to lose Darius Slayton, can you honestly say there's another receiver on that team that warrants double coverage? I don't know that you can even say that about Wan'Dale Robinson, to be honest with you. So, that to me is a big need. We mentioned offensive line, I think, getting a guard in here. That's a huge need as well, because apparently they're not going to go with Evan Neal. It doesn't look like it's going to be Evan Neal. Joshua Azudu, like you pointed out, hasn't quite panned out. Jake Kubas is still kind of raw, and I think they're going to cross train him for center as well. So who do they have at that spot? Really nobody, unless they bring back Van Roten, and I don't know that they will. Safety is a big need. Jason Pinnock is probably going to move on. And even if he didn't move on, I would look to upgrade that spot anyway. And then edge rusher, to me, is a sneaky need. They're probably not going to re-sign Aziz Ojulari. So do you roll the dice on a guy like Chase Young or Bosa, who just got released by Los Angeles Chargers? So these are all needs. There's plenty of needs across the board. And, some people might even throw in inside linebacker. I think they can probably get away with what they have at inside linebacker, though it does bear mention that Micah McFadden's entering the final year of his contract. So do you want to, do you feel good about Darius Muaso eventually being your full-time starter? So that might be a position they might have to wait till next year for, but definitely offensive line, wide receiver 2, safety, that's a need. Edge rusher, that's another need, in addition to quarterback and cornerback and defensive line.
Yeah, and you mentioned inside linebacker, Patty, and I have to mention the report that we saw earlier this week about the idea that maybe there are some people within the Giants organization who aren't exactly supportive of Bobby Okereke, inside linebacker, defensive captain, really good player, had an outstanding year 2023. With Wink Martindale, was actually a very vocal supporter of Martindale's, not nearly as impactful in 2024. I don't know what's going to happen there. I don't know why there would be friction with Okereke, because he's a good guy, seems to be a good locker room presence, all those things. Maybe just not a perfect fit for Shane Bowen, but I can't see why you wouldn't try to figure it out with Okereke, rather and why you wouldn't do that instead of try to move on from the guy.
Yeah, I suspect there was some frustration, just being around Bobby last year. You could kind of tell he was frustrated. You watch his play on the field. There were times when he just kind of looked like a rookie, didn't know what the heck he was doing out there or what he should be doing. And I've always said this, when a player has a good year and then the following year he comes back with a clunker, you got to ask yourself, is it the player that suddenly fell off the cliff? Or in this case, was it the change in scheme? And a good coach worth his weight in gold will figure out how to best utilize the strengths of his players, even if it means tweaking the scheme and going outside of what he's been accustomed to running for years. I don't know that Shane Bowen did as good of a job in that area last year as maybe he could have. So, to your point about Bobby, think about this for a second. Bobby had that back injury that he tried to push through. Bobby never publicly complained about anything, about how the team was doing, about the lack of effort, whatever you want to point to. So, in that regard, what could you possibly have a problem with Bobby Okereke about if you're the Giants, unless that he was coming to Joe Shane's office every day and complaining behind closed doors. And I don't think that's Bobby's style. I could be wrong, and I don't want to dispute the report, because obviously, Pat Leonard's got his sources, and who am I to question his sources and whatnot. But I just hope, like you said, that they can work it out and just figure it out if there is indeed friction there. And and above all, Shea Bowen, like I said, has got to do a better job tapping into what his players do well, even if it means deviating from what Bowen has run historically.
I think we talked about cornerback. I think Tay Banks is another example of
Yes.
that,
Yep.
because Tay was drafted for Wink Martindale's defense. He was drafted to be a press man, get up in your face corner. And part of the deal with Tay is, was he really ready for being, for the responsibility of trailing number one wide receivers last year? I don't know that was the best use for him, which is why the Giants really should go out and spend money on a cornerback one. But the other part of that is, there was a massive drop off in the amount of man-to-man coverage that the Giants played.
Right.
And we talked it that didn't suit Jason Pinnock as well. And
Blitzing too.
right, and it didn't suit Tay Banks as well either.
There were a few
So
guys that
yeah,
didn't suit well. And again, if we're going to say that Joe Shane's on the hot seat, that Brian Dable's on the hot seat, well, Shane Bowen, you're on the hot seat too, my friend. You better figure out how to better deploy and tap into the talents of the guys you have. And
right.
I just don't think he did a good enough job in that regard last year. It
No,
was one of the reasons why, quite honestly, I was surprised that he was brought back.
well, it was interesting. The defense overall, numbers wise, wasn't the Giants' primary issue last year. The defense, before all of the injuries struck to Okereke, to Dexter, on and on and on, the defense was middle of the pack. And yet the defense wasn't as good as what the talent, before all those injuries, it wasn't as good as what the talent said that it could have been. And yeah, I just think the Giants didn't want to. I don't know if you agree with this. I just think they didn't want to have to start over on defense with another scheme, and all of that. And plus, Patty, everybody knew and everybody knows, coaches all know the situation with Brian Daboll. How many good choices were the Giants going to have for top tier defensive coordinators, if they had decided to move on from Shane Bowen?
Right. And this is a make or break year for this staff. Let's call it what it is. If they lose again and they have another bad season, that whole staff is probably going to be tossed aside. So why would you uproot your family if you're a defensive coordinator or any kind of assistant coach? Why would you pick up your family and move them to New Jersey, knowing that, okay, am I going to be here just for a year, or am I going to be here for multiple years?
Absolutely. Anyway, Patty, it feels like the off season has already gone on forever. And the reality of it is, Patty, that it's just getting started.
I know.
So we will see what happens next week. I know you'll be busy cranking away content, on your website, on your podcast, as will I at Big Blue View. And so we'll see which one of us manages to make it through the week with a little bit of energy left, Patty.
Can you do it without coffee?
No,
I
no,
can.
no. See, you're younger than I am, though, Patty.
Not by much, though.
Yes, but coffee is just one of those things. It just has to happen. Patty, I actually violated my own rule in Indianapolis last week. I actually went and had Starbucks. I do not drink Starbucks. I drink
Oh
Dunkin'
my!
Donuts. I was
Oh
sitting.
wow!
I
Oh,
was
big
sitting.
scoop here.
It is a big scoop because I'm a Dunkin' Donuts person. I actually have a T-shirt that says "Friends don't let friends drink Starbucks," and I actually was sitting outside the Starbucks at the JW Marriott and broke down and had a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So
You better
that
hope nobody from Dunkin' Donuts is watching, because there goes your sponsorship.
I know, out the window. All right. Anyway, Patty, I appreciate the time. Giants fans, thank you as always for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.